Welcome, everyone. Sorry that I'm late. It seems like the last 2 or 3 times. Anyway, next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. Approval of prior meeting minutes. Everybody got a chance to look over the minutes from our February meeting, February 25th.
Motion to approve, Chairman.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Committee assignments. Okay. Help me. So do we keep going, or
Committee assignments, so.
you gave us a list the last
Yeah, you
meeting?
did. Well, because of course,
We have the nominating committee has not met.
no, but because of course, Chuck has
Right.
stepped down from the board, and he was a member of the executive committee. We need to talk about potentially adding another person to the executive committee. I think that was all we wanted to talk about
Okay.
in this group.
Does anybody have any suggestions?
I think it would be appropriate that it come from the northern area, just because that's the area he hailed from. Not stuck on any one particular person, but Judy Poe comes to mind as someone.
The second that, for Judy Butler. I mean, Judy's been on the board for a long time, and very active and knowledgeable.
All right. That's a motion and a second? Okay. All right. And we did just make a motion and second and appoint her, and she's,
I think you would make a recommendation to the full board.
right? Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
And then,
Judy will not be here. Right.
Oh, that's great.
Perfect.
that is exactly
Perfect.
Okay. We also, Charles resigning, we need a vice chair. Any suggestions from Mandy or Michael, Ryan? Nobody have any?
Playing those things, no.
Michael Lavender Michael will be a great vice chair. He's got some more free time now, he's no longer county commissioner. He has lots of free time in his hands. Tax season is right now over, and
I will tell you that at some point we had a break in last week. Billy Kennedy approached me and said if no one else wanted to do it, he would do it. He wasn't, he would just let me know that he was interested.
is Billy on the executive committee?
No,
So that vice chair of the executive committee, vice chair of the board?
vice chair of the board.
Oh, okay.
Do we have a recommendation, anybody?
Well, would it make, would you want to have, somebody's going to be vice chair, you want them to be on executive committee, right?
Absolutely. Currently we have 5.
Judy on
I think Michael's been here, he knows how the business is conducted, he can run a meeting, he's experienced with that. So I would certainly, and maybe want to second it, just as soon as I say I nominate Michael Lavender for you.
You must have ESPN as
For recommendation to the, as vice chair of the board.
Second.
All right, Mike. Okay, that's enough. Thank you, Mike. You got to speak.
Thank you.
Thank
You know,
We've got enough votes out, vote.
All in favor?
if you were absent a lot, I might come in.
Aye.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay.
Good job.
Michael Lavender will be our recommendation to the board.
Yes.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you,
Good
Mike.
job.
Great acceptance speech.
Pay the same? No increase in pay, right? Just-
Yeah, same, yes.
You just got on road.
Yeah.
I'm just glad Rick's here all the time.
Okay, rebranding.
making progress. Finding good progress.
Right.
Let's see, I'm not even sure, where exactly did we leave off on the last talk?
We were talking about the name, in which we could talk more about that in closed session, because we have to settle some things first and let you guys see it. And there are some other things that we need to, we're going to show you from a video standpoint, but it's some information that we have to talk about in the executive session as well. As it's a blend, so I don't know how to separate it at this moment, so we'll just do it in the closed session. If that's okay with everyone. But I imagine you did see some of the media that came up, like about the naloxones, in the press, in the Citizen Times, and the Express, Mountain Express, a couple of, and on television as well. You'll probably start, not probably, you will start seeing more of that coming out. We're strategically placing it so that each individual initiative that we're working on gets its own identity, its own place in the community, so they can focus specifically on that, and we're doing it by counties as well. So there's more to come, because it's going to only intensify now. We laid the foundation and have everything from an organizational standpoint. We have to bring it along, as I said before. We have to do a lot of this marketing internally more than externally, so now that the employees are up to speed about what we're doing, we'll speed up a lot more too.
You know, what we could do is that box with the bound versions of the reinvestment plan in your office? I'll go get them. We have a really nice, when I was in Raleigh, of course, I had an opportunity to meet with a lot of folks and gave out a nice bound version of our reinvestment plan. We should do those as board members. I'll grab those in between when we get done.
Yeah, we have that in the slide as well.
All right, Secretary's consolidation proposal.
Well, let's see. Has everybody got the press release, the map, the press release that we did, I guess, the information we sent to staff? I don't know that there's, I don't know anything more from the perspective of the Secretary's office right now. So,
All right, okay, moving right along, Medicaid reform.
spend some time in Raleigh, try to piggyback things. They met with the secretary on the consolidation stuff. We met with the chairs of the various health and human service committees. Very good. Josh Dobson was there. Tommy Tucker was there at Ralph Heiss's request. Marilyn Avila was paid Nelson Dollar and Pat Porter. We did a really, turned out to be a really good presentation that Lisa Wainwright and I had given the day before at the DWAC meeting, and it was really an information session about why the LME MCOs have money, what we're doing with it, what the requirements are around it, and it was probably 15 slides worth of explanation, going all the way back to the negotiation of the waiver with CMS and how this was always a part of it, and all the requirements for accounting purposes and other reasons, that I like to put it, the baked-in portions of that. And They were very appreciative of that, asked a lot of questions. You would have thought we were champions. They're very positive. And as it relates to, any discussion about the waiver and Medicaid reform, I'll just say in that moment, it was probably a 2-hour meeting, a lot of favor for maintaining just what it is we do into the future. Now, I wouldn't bet the ranch on that, but there was a lot of recognition for the fact that we really have done what we were asked to, that it is successful. These reinvestment activities are a great byproduct of the public model, because where would the money be if we weren't a public organization? Anybody have any idea?
Be in the stockholders' pockets.
Right.
That's exactly where it's at. We had that discussion here for a long, long time, said it'd be a whole lot more.
But
We tried to break it down yesterday, and we might have had a little discussion.
glad that people are getting more aware of the benefits of this model. And in fact, taking real pride in
But
it.
what the model does, the whole idea here is to get the numbers. It's all about numbers, as you know, Brian. We talked about it in length yesterday. If you take what Partners and Smoky, if you look at the maps. Now, the kick here is one little county called Nash. Remember that name, Nash County. Because it's really interesting. We'll talk about that in close second. But it's about the money. And the claws are out. Every insurance company is talking about lots of money. And what they will do, they will say if Brian Ingram has a certain problem, it's $420. Book it. That's it. That's all it's going to be paid to you. That's it. And so you can pull different ones from Ohio. You can pull, different states and see how they've done that. Other people have done it. Brian has done it. Smoky can look at it. They look good. And to treat people with behavioral problems, you can't say we can treat you for $421. You cannot do that. But that's what the profit margins, they can't even estimate what the profit margins are on some of these privatization companies. But they're huge. But they don't have to disclose that to you. They just say we'll take care of this population for $391,000 for X amount of dollars. Period. And you have no local input, you have nothing. Literally. And they'll give you a report. If you want to complain, there's a process. It's a 21-step process. 21 steps. But now it's coming. Don't think it's not headed this way. It is. And it's coming. This is the first step. And it's coming. And if we're not in position to, it's coming.
Amen.
Nash County, remember that.
Okay. I will say to connect together 6 and 7 a little bit, one of the things that I was very adamant as much as I could be was around the desire to have a real connection between all of this work on consolidation and there being a very distinct future for us in Medicaid reform. You can't make people go through all of this for nothing. There better be a clear path for us around that. Talk about some more specific comments on that later.
Do you think in the numbers game that we lose out a little bit in consolidation?
We're going to be the smallest of all the four.
Right.
But
I mean, by reputation and size right now, we have quite a bit of clout.
yeah, we're in good shape. We're in good shape.
Primarily because of our reputation, I assume.
And Partners has a good
Well,
reputation.
there's a caveat to that, and I had to make that argument yesterday. That's true, but the number of counties, if you look at Trillium, and you take the number of counties that they've incorporated, and look at the population, if you take the number of counties in the area, where actually, you can't do the data's not correct if you take the area, if you take Trillium's area and the number of counties in the total population, then we're not the smallest. If you combine the two,
Just in terms of Medicaid covered lives.
in the number of people, but the area, give us, you throw in Davie, Davison, and Rowan,
We can,
that's what I told him, that's what we'll be out there with them. So it's the area plus the, I mean, so you have to look at both. I don't, and we've made it point here, we don't want to be penalized because of the number. Don't just look, you can't just look at the 300,000 number and say, oh, well. But I mean, there's topography that plays a part too. And there's different things and on the coast but when you look at Trillium, I don't know, but that's another discussion. I think that reason Nash County is going to play a part too. Okay. But that's another, but you have to look at not only but the area is huge. I mean, you look at Trillium's coverage.
Does percent Medicaid change much pre and post this consolidation? We clearly have the lowest percentage of Medicaid population. Is that true, Natalie?
I'm sorry, the percent?
Says Medicaid members,
Mm-hmm.
21% is what it shows in the consolidated. For us, 29 for North Central, 24 for Eastern Region, and 26 for South Central. I didn't know if that was driven here or there.
Oh, it's 21% of the state total.
Oh, so it's not a per capita?
No,
Is
no,
there much
no,
difference between that? Now, Christina made the comment to DSS directors that y'all are seeing a real increase in the non-Medicaid service components. So that's not related to any of that?
That's just the percentage of total Medicaid eligibility in
For
the
the
state.
state? Okay. So are they about the same in terms of per capita across the
No.
state?
No, there's some big differences. And again, I mean, you just have to pull out a chart that looks at all of that. You know, some states that have large population, like Wake, for example, has a large population, it has a
That's
smaller,
yeah.
I mean, there's always those kind of things. So that's why, you know, you have general population versus Medicaid eligibles. And you, at the end of the day, for our stuff, it really comes down to the number of Medicaid eligible folks you have because that drives the capitation. And I've made those points as well, Ronnie. Some things, when you get bigger, become more expensive and much more difficult.
Exactly right.
A lot of the folks, you know, with all due respect to, you know, everybody trying to work this out, they haven't sat where I have or you folks have. You know, they haven't operated a plan or done a, you know, major transformation, you know, like this.
Or run a lemonade stand.
Well, that too. So there's things that, you know, may appear logical or straightforward or easy or something that are not. Everybody talks about, oh, consolidation, you know, you save a lot of money. Well, maybe after a bunch of years you could, not in the beginning. I mean, I'll give DHHS credit. I mean, when we consolidated with Western, I think it was between $4 and $5 million, and they said, yeah, you're right. You know, and really helped us out with some, you know, ways that they let us retain some money to cover costs. So, you know, it's been demonstrated that it doesn't always save money. In fact, it's more expensive. But it'd be a different situation with partners, and, you know, time will tell.
Any more discussion? All right, hearing none. Need to have a closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318-11A1 in order to prevent disclosure of competitive healthcare information that is privileged or confidential pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 122C, 126.1, not considered a public record within the meaning of Chapter 136 of the General Statute, and to consult with attorneys pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318-11A3.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that carries unanimously. Okay, all right, is there any other business? Is there any other business? Michael, is there any other business? Anybody got more business? Is there a motion for adjournment?
Yes.
So moved.
Rodney, you second that?
Yes.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Yes.
all right, we're ready to get started?
Yes.
Yes.
Fred has the recorder.
Okay, Fred has a recorder on, okay? I'd like to welcome everyone to call the meeting to order. As you can see, I'm not Judy Poe. Standing in for Judy. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve it?
One issue, I do need to amend the agenda and to add an item, and it's the HR compensation initiative.
We're at,
I would put it before updates, or as an update.
okay. Take care. Okay, with the one addition, is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Mike?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Approval of the February 25th Finance Committee minutes. Has everyone had a chance to look at the minutes?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the finance committee minutes.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. Okay, Fred, January financial reports.
So these are the statements for Smoky as of January 31st. I'll go through some of the highlight items. First, going through the balance sheet. As of the 31st of January, the cash, checking, and interest accounts stood at $83.3 million. The cash and Medicaid risk reserve now stands at $22.2 million. The investment in the North Carolina Management Trust stands at $14.3. Let's round it out. Total assets for the period as ended was at $137.4 million. On the liabilities part of the balance sheet, accounts payable stood at $8.8 million, and the accounts payable IBNR Medicaid stood at $19.7. The total liabilities for the period stood at $29.7 million. I will not go through the details of the fund balance except to refer down to unassigned current year Medicaid, which now stands at $7.1 million. What that stands for is what revenue over expense is from the beginning of the fiscal year, July 1, as of January 30th. So that is the net earnings for the period. The total fund balance as of January 31st is at 107.7, let's call it 107.7 million, and the total liabilities and fund balance at 137.4 million. Are there any questions in terms of the balance sheet? Moving on then, the next statement I will review, which is an accounting term called a P&L sheet, but here we refer to it as the analysis of revenue and expenditures. I'll first review the fifth column, which is total Medicaid. Service revenue for the period as of January 31st stood at $158.5 million. Expenses for the period on the service side was at $152.7. So revenue over expense for the period on the service side at $5.8 million. Administrative revenue, as far as Medicaid stood, was at $20.4 million, expenses at $19.1, so revenue over expense on the administrative side at $1.3 million. So net combined revenue over expense on the Medicaid side stood at $7.1 million for the close of the period. Any questions in reference to that? The risk reserve contribution as of, from the beginning of the fiscal year to now, stood at let's call it 3.6 million, which is at the very, very bottom of that fifth column. Going to the next grouping, under state and federal, service revenue stood at 34 million. Service expense, which I will explain, stood at 39, so that expenses exceeded revenue at the $5 million mark. On the administrative revenue side, please keep in mind we're talking about state and federal here, stood at 1.56 million, expenses at 3.73, so expenses exceeded revenue at 2.17 million. So the net combined excess of expenses over revenue on the state and federal side stood at 7.16. Explanation. And I'll be repeating this till the end of the fiscal year in a moment. When the decision was made by the General Assembly and signed into the budget bill that we were required to do both a reduction in single stream funding and then to replace that with fund balance dollars. So how does that occur? In essence, the expenses are still being accumulated given that we are responsible for backfilling with fund balance dollars equity to replace that single stream funding reduction. The revenue stands at the reduced amount. The use of equity funds to cover those expenses is not a revenue. So what you will always see in this column to the balance of the fiscal year is in essence a net loss, which is being made up by equity contribution from our fund balance. So this is suggestive of what the net, in terms of the financials on an accrual basis, loss happens to be. Our contribution is actually greater than this loss will indicate, and there are reasons for that, which I can certainly get into with details, but it does take, and I will do this at year-end, a detailed review of how both the expenses were accrued, what our contribution was, what the differences can be accounted for, not only on an accrual basis, but on a cash basis. So I know the numbers look odd, but that is because this is what the state and federal revenue actually is, what our state and federal expenses in that column actually were, and on an accrual basis, what the net loss happens to be. Going to the total column, which is the final one. Services from all sources stood at 196.9 million as far as revenue is concerned. Expenses for the period at 194.2 million. So that revenue exceeded expenses by 2.8 million on the services side. As far as administrative revenue, that stood at 22.76 million. Expenses at 22.8. There was a net expense over revenue on the administrative side, and that again is because of the reduction that occurred in single stream, and that was taken out of administration as well. So the allocation that was made in terms of the administrative dollars that we to receive from the state, that we're replacing with equity funds as well. So this loss is being accounted for. So the net expense over revenue for the period as of the end of January stood at 2.7 million. Please keep in mind how things are balanced here. Going to the bottom of the fifth column on the Medicaid side and the bottom of the state and federal column as far as that side is concerned. The net revenue over expense on the Medicaid side stood at 7.1 million. On an accrual basis, the net loss as far as state and federal almost compensated for the difference at $7.2 million. There were some contributions from other sources so that the net, combining all sources of revenue over expense for the period, stood at $2.7 million. Again, the difference here being the single stream reduction that we're making up for in equity contribution. I know it makes the understanding of the sheet difficult, but it is what it is. Questions? Moving on to the next financial statement, which is the cash flow statement, again, as of the end of January. And this reflects, and I really have to focus on the title here, this excludes the risk fund reserve, which is, for all practical purposes, not accessible to us as far as cash is concerned. This talks about cash excluding the risk reserve. So in terms of operations in the month of January, there's a drop from, as far as cash flow is concerned, and that was at $256,538 from all sources, and this is the interplay between accounts receivable and accounts payable, as well as the contributions from prepaid that stood at $1.74 million. So the net cash flows from operation activities stood at a negative $2 million. A way of explaining this is that at the beginning of January, the cash position stood at $99.7 million, and at the end of January, it stood at $97.6 million. Again, this is partially a result of, again, our contribution of equity funds, which essentially is taking from cash balance to make up the difference in what the single stream replacement stood for. Year to date, from July 1 through the end of January then, at the beginning of the period, we stood in a cash position of $103.7 million, and we're now down, as I had indicated, at the end of January, at $97.6. As we proceed through the course of the year, that will continue to decline. Questions about
How does that compare to this time last year, that same period last year?
We, in terms of just cash available, it's comparable within a couple of $1 million. What's different is the trending. Last year we were trending up in terms of cash, and now we're trending down because of the single stream replacement that we're being asked to do.
And how much money was that? Remind me.
Excuse me?
How much single stream?
As far as single stream replacement, it's just under $15 million. It's like 14.99 something.
Okay.
How much, just roughly, do we have in the risk reserve?
How much? How much
In the
what?
risk reserve right now?
The dollar amount is 22.2. Recall that the requirements for the risk reserve for all of the LME MCOs is that it be 15% of the capitation payments. And this is not to the exact amount, it's about $300 million. So the expectation is that we would grow to about $45 million before the risk reserve requirement is satisfied. Moving to the next statement, which is the Medicaid budget to actual through January 2016. We euphemistically refer to this as the clinical budget. I will just address the major categories. Medicaid B, which is our mental health services, stood under our planned budget by about $459,000. Medicaid C, which is the innovation part, stood under budget by about $40,000, just a smidge. As far as B3, it was way under at $938,000. Net for the period year end stood at $1.4 million under. This is somewhat deceptive, and I will try to communicate this as clearly as I can. At the end of FY15, the division inappropriately clawed back approximately $2 million in innovation funds. What they decided is that there was reimbursement that we received during the periods that we were not entitled to. 2 months after the close of that period, they had made an error, which they discovered, and gave us our money back. Well, that's all well and good. It occurs as a net revenue for the period. That revenue has to appear in this statement and in this plan. But it's not in the capitation for this year. So you're talking about a $2 million bond generated from an FY15 contribution into the current fiscal year that is not supported in the current year in terms of the capitation payment. So while this is under budget, another way of looking at it is, good thing we got that $2 million. Is one way of looking at it.
Which means we're would normally be 1.5 in the hole, is that what you're saying?
I wouldn't consider that in the whole, because please keep in mind, we're talking about on the Medicaid side over $300 million in budget. So when you're talking about $600,000 as of the end of January, with almost half of the fiscal year to go, we're just talking about a fraction. So I would not identify that as being in the whole. I will not go through all of the dashboards, just some high-level kinds of things. On the expense ratio, this is the medical expense ratio. We stood at about 95%, which is well within the range of what our expectations would be year to date. On the state and federal funds, you will see that the medical expense ratio is actually higher than what we received. And again, this is a reflection of what occurred with the single stream replacement, which disproportionately affected the state receipt of administrative service dollars, which we are replacing with our own equity or the fund balance. So that appears in this particular dashboard fairly clearly. Going to page 2, which is the current Medicaid current ratio, it stands at a healthy 2.89. The current ratio is a ratio of current assets over current liabilities, just segregating it on the Medicaid side. For all sources, it stands at 3.73. Again, this is that ratio between current assets and current liabilities. Both are healthy measures thus far. However, I would indicate, again, as a result of the single stream replacement, those ratios over time will decline.
And it's actually trending down.
Yes, and that will be the case.
Yeah.
Going to page 3, total Medicaid paid claims as of January 31st stood at $132.7 million. The IBNR for the period stood at 19.7. So we're currently spending at a healthy 99% of the Medicaid budgeted revenues that we were anticipated to receive. Going to the pie chart on page 4, which is Medicaid services by service category. This has remained fairly consistent through the course of the year. Obviously, the two largest categories are ICFMR and innovations, and together they account for 51% of all of our expenditures by service category for the LME MCO as a whole. Going to the next dashboard, Medicaid services expense by category of aid. Again, this has been fairly consistent throughout the course of the year. Blind, disabled, 21 plus, innovations and AFDC 3 plus account for 82% of the total. And that has been almost to the percentage the same since the start of the fiscal year. Questions about any of those? And unless there are any questions about any of the other dashboards, I will go to page 8, which is Medicaid defensive interval. Again, this is given what's currently cash available on the Medicaid side. If we did not receive an additional dime, how long would our cash last to pay existing obligations, and it now stands at 92.7 days, and that's what that number stands for, is days. So that's healthy. Let's hope we can.
So we have a full 3 months before you have to plan the bake sales and car washes.
Well, we'd be baking for the 3 months, so make it
So
hard.
we can get that started. I know Jill is quite a nice baker too.
Yeah.
So she's sure kicking. And Jerry,
Yes.
Yeah.
Car washes, I mean,
you can wash the car, can't you, Jerry?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes, sir. By hand.
So that, Mr. Chairman, is the presentation of the financial reports and the dashboards for the period, and we'll certainly open any questions.
any questions or comments, or we need a motion to approve? Is there a motion, Nancy, to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, where did Jim go?
Well, you can get started here.
Okay, he has the next item, which has to
We
do
can
with
hand these out.
HR compensation initiative.
Jerry over there, we don't want to forget him.
Thank you, sir.
So at this part of the agenda for the Finance Committee, I will defer to my colleague, James Brooks.
No pressure.
As I walk in the door.
Well, let me get you started. We talked a little bit about this in executive committee. You know, we're continuing to evolve ourselves around all the features associated with being a public manager of care here in North Carolina. And as we very well know, the fit for us in state personnel is a rough one. We're the only public authority that is still part of state personnel. It really was never designed for organizations like us. No one could have ever envisioned that there would be organizations like us when all of this stuff was put together. So we find ourselves getting off from time to time. And one of the benefits, of course, when you get a new HR guy in here, you know, he has a new set of eyes to look at things, and you just have to make adjustments. So this is really a combination of, you see on the first line there, COLA. And historically, we have done this whenever we could. It's really something we try to do, we like to do every year, and we can't always, but when we can, we do. And it's really about that simple. The rest of it fits into a category really of trying to reward people for working hard and doing a good job, and Jim and Steve and Fred can talk about the whole process we went through to review a group of employees, and you see it's 57 folks that would get an additional, well, we start over, would get a, if you want to use the word bonus or merit, however you'd like to think about it. And of course, because the way the math works on this, similar to how we've done it before, you don't get less than $1,000. So if you're on a lower income part of things, you're not penalized by simply getting a percentage increase. And then the other category, which is kind of a generalized salary correction and adjustments, is a combination of things that equates to, I'd say, corrections, where people are simply not paid quite right based on where their job description, their step. And again, it's kind of the system that we're locked into. Sometimes you can fix that with a step. Sometimes you just fix it with money, because at the end of the day, it's about money. So it's a combination of those things and some one-time only merit payments, I guess we'll say as well. So in a general, as a general description, you know, that's what we have here, and we can go to whatever level of detail you want or discussion about it. What did I forget, Jim?
That's exactly on point. I think that the organization is, we're attempting to recruit, reward, and retain our best employees. And we are trying to move from a paying you for breathing to pay for performance model. And this is our attempt, as it says, phase one of getting to that. And the executive leadership team, I think, should be commended for the steps that they took in it. And as the CEOs pointed out to me today, Brian was saying, it's hard if that's not what you're used to, the process you're used to going to. And so there was a lot of thought put into this to reward the people who have helped us in our success to get to this point. And to also think of those folk at the bottom of the totem pole, if you will, as opposed to just at the top. And so this is that mixed match of trying to get that right.
You know, we could have spent 3 months working on this. I mean, it just, you have to kind of make peace with it at some point. And, you know, I feel good about it, I will tell you that. And I sat in the room with the executive group and Jim and kind of heard all the back and forth and, you know.
Well, I sat through a CFAC meeting, and I'm going to tell you that CFAC meeting couldn't have come at a better time bringing this before the board. Simple reason being, listening to Donald Ruth's presentation to make us realize how well Smokey is, number one, using what savings we have to put into programs that blew a lot of people's minds at CFAC on Monday night. There is no way, if anybody sat through that presentation, could look at this and say, we shouldn't be doing this. Because the work that Smokey is getting ready to ask their employees to do with the improvements and the outreach and the new programs, they deserve every penny that we're looking at them getting. And I fight every minute and every step of the way to see if this board approves it.
Well, you know, if you look at the numbers, 475 employees,
Yes.
only 57 of those receiving merits, bonuses, whatever you want to call it. I mean, from the county government side, I mean, usually we sort of figure around 15%, somewhere in that neighborhood, and you're well under that. I mean, salary corrections and adjustments, that to me is, in our organization, which is smaller, we're always looking at job descriptions and making sure people are doing what they're supposed to be doing, or if they're doing something else, rewriting the job descriptions, looking at those and seeing how to play. I mean, that's
Same kind of thing.
yeah, it takes time to do that, but I mean, these are really low numbers.
Yes.
I think it's reasonable, very reasonable.
Absolutely.
I mean, you know, if you don't know about the business of it, I mean, you look at it, it is a lot of money, but in the scheme of things, you look at the number of people it impacts, it's really not that many.
No, it's not. And like I said, to listen to that presentation on Monday night, there isn't any way around not doing this.
Yeah.
No way.
And some of the, what the board would like you guys to consider too, because what we're adjusting is multiple, I guess, mergers and integrations. And so each different MCO had a different way of compensating their staff, so when you merge them together, it creates a lot of inequity. And I hate to use the word a lot because it's relative, but of the 400 people, there's 3 or 4 MCOs in there. And to try to make an adjustment to equalize it, it's difficult to do unless you just do it in all one swoop. And if you do it in this environment, if you tried to make the adjustment right for everyone, it would be questioned to the point where it might be misunderstood. So we have to take some time to try to adjust it, and we're just doing this to try to keep some of the key people on the whole level. I mean, all the different levels, because there's multiple individuals contributing at a high level, even at the entry level. So to do it for, we didn't look at this as doing it for just the top performers, like the Donald Bruce's and stuff.
Yeah.
We looked down throughout the organization and made sure it was fairly looked upon as making decisions about what we need to do. And it's going to take a while. We have to probably change our are structured to some degree to make it more of like a total comp kind of thing, because you can't just do it all in base, and you can't do it in bonus, because it all depends on what we receive for PM. So we don't necessarily always know what's going to happen next year. So we're doing it, trying to do the best we can with the limited funds that we have. Does that make sense?
It does.
It does, and you tell Donald Rooks he came at the right time.
Michael, what you ready to say?
I don't disagree with anything that's been said, just for my knowledge. That can you remind us over the last, say, 5 to 10 years, what our history has been on the COLAs? I can't remember.
I can speak to the last 3 years, I believe. I know, because in fact for us, this is actually recommended more or less a 2.5% COLA, which represents a 1.25, because last year you didn't give them anything as far as COLA. The year before you gave 2. Those are the ones I'm familiar with. I'm not sure about prior to then. And I would also compare this to the national average, which is I think 3.1 this year. And so it's underneath that as well. And as we point out, the fact of the matter is that you went from being an 85 employee organization to almost a 500. Along the way, things that, it was just pointed out, due to the number of integrations that you went through, things got off track, and so it's going to take time to get back on track. And this is just a step toward that.
In a very brief fashion, how did you determine who got the merit pay?
Yeah, good question.
Human Resources came up with a criteria that we recommend to the executive leadership team. It was 4 things. One was that the person actually had done above their expectations, because we pay you to do your job. The key is then to get to the Don Rooses and stuff who are doing above that. In addition, there was the criteria of that they had not, whether we looked at their current salary as far as equity, things of that nature, and then each of their home supervisor, if you will, the current supervisor from the leadership level, had to recommend them based upon those criteria. And then those were applied across the board, and each of the executive leadership team members made recommendations on who they wanted, and then through their discussions, they decided on that. As you said, it's actually, I think, less than 10% of our people, or just above 10% of our people, which ones would get it.
So 2 levels of review, the kind of who your supervisor would be, let's just say, and then the executive level person over that particular area in the organization.
And each executive got to examine, review, that's the offerings of others. So this was done as an executive leadership.
And so, for example, within the categories or departments, for example, you feel comfortable that no one supervisor is predominating with their folks getting.
Right. And that's why it was done the way that it was, instead of that Steve Simmons would only pick his people, by the executive leadership team coming together as a group. We looked organization-wide on who are the people that are moving us forward, and there had to be consensus at that level of who was contributing what. Also, there was pushback, I will say, on just what we talked about earlier, that it wasn't just the people up here that you see, that manager, executive sees every day, but that they also look down below.
And then on the corrections and adjustments, I assume the process you went through will put those people where they need to be so that going forward, in other words, it's not just a salary bump, you're putting them back in line with where their position should have been classified to begin with. Is that?
We're doing actually both. Quite frankly, as Brian pointed out, and I don't want to actually call it a Band-Aid, but this is a first step. We need to do both. We're looking now right at internal equity. How do these people in their grade level compare with other people within the organization? HR, within the next few months, is going to begin an external equity. How do we as an organization compare to our environment here? And as Brian pointed out, it's hard because it's hard to find comparisons to us, because we're so unique. And so with that process will be coming up as well to make sure that we stay online. And then that will almost become the annual, that will be an annual process so that we stay level from then on out.
Let me try to answer a little bit, I think, what you're asking too. The 51 people that we're talking about, to say that we got them where they need to be, we just got them closer to where they probably need to be. Because of there was a real big disparity between where they are. So we had, and I would like to compliment some of the, well, I don't know all the managers yet, how they receive it, but when you think about it, when you talk all the managers down throughout the line, some of them are recommending people knowing they may not receive something. And so, and that takes a lot out of a person to say, you know, I think that person, I'm not receiving something this time. So we made some adjustments also to just get people closer to where to try to get some equity alignment. An example, you could have a care coordinator who started from another organization or even just within Smoky, and they're performing at the same level as someone who's making, I'll make a number up, 55,000. And then there's one who was making something like that, 35. So they may not have moved all the way up to 55, but they got closer by. So we're trying to equalize it in stages so we could have an equity and then look across the board and make sure it's all fair.
As long as you're looking for a care coordination in half.
Now, the other thing that we have to, remember to say is that it's all relative to the amount of funds we have to spend.
That's right.
So we did this up to a point, okay? And we carefully thought about the annualized cost next year and whatever we're able to do as part of phase 2. And again, is it perfect? No, it's better. It's better.
Yeah.
Whatever we do as phase 2 will be dependent upon the budget next year and what kind of comfort zone we have with that, et cetera, et cetera. So
I guess part of the reason I'm asking on that one in particular is, knowing that there might be more coming later, as you say, but also in a merger type situation, trying to retain employees and so forth, because we'll probably have some additional cost of doing that. So you have to kind of say, okay, what's our immediate cost and what's it going to be coming real soon?
That's
it's
right.
a very dynamic, there's a lot of things at play here. I mean, there's just as Jim said, part of this is retention, part of this is correction. It's never done. It's just, trying to make it better all along the way.
And I assume, Fred, you feel financially we can handle this?
We can certainly handle this in this fiscal year, and it's a reasonable projection as far as next. In terms of what the Medicaid revenue will be next year, I won't know for another 3 to 4 weeks. And on the state side, your guess is as good as mine.
So we need to make a motion to recommend to the full.
I'll make that motion. I'm very
And
comfortable
I'll
with it.
second it 100% wholeheartedly.
Only 100%?
And I'll tell the board that.
All right, there's a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Just as a question outside the realm of that, about how many employees do we have that would fall in the category of making, say, above, I'm just going to pick an arbitrary figure, maybe 80 grand?
Now we can find out.
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, our average salary is actually below that.
I think the average is
So you're talking about less than half of the workforce. I can tell you that just from calculations that I have to routinely do. Jim can give me the exact number, but it is less than that.
Another point that I would like to note is that at the same time we're doing these adjustments and we're talking to the employees about their jobs, and we're also asking them to do more than what they've done in the past.
Oh, yes.
So,
If you don't believe me, see Donald Ruth's presentation.
Okay. So, any other business or finance? Fred?
Well, the only little communication I would make is certain Western Highlands MPI issues persist. That still has not been corrected, and you're a happy man when it is.
Oh, Lord, I'm just a pain in the I sit beside you just to poke you every once in a while.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So you,
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
What is the meeting start?
8:30.
I'm so glad I saw the president tonight.
Me too.
Okay. Welcome, everyone, to our meeting. Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started. At this time, I'll call our roll. Nancy Baker.
Here.
Ronnie Beal.
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Jack Hahn.
Yes.
Carolyn Coward.
Here.
Ira Dove. Joyce Edwards.
Here.
Maggie Faulkner.
Here.
All right. Vicki Green. Myrna Harris.
Here.
Dr. Jeff Heck. Judy Johansson.
Here.
Billy Kennedy.
Here.
Michael Lavender.
Here.
Pat McGinnis.
Here.
Morris Pittman. And Judy Pope, who knows I'm over here. Mandy Stone. Duncan Sumter. Okay, we have a quorum. Okay. There are 4 proxies. Okay, at this time, public comment. We have 2 speakers, Mary Short and Jerry Rice. Mary?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm going to come over here, Jerry.
Okay.
Hi, Mary Short from Alexander County, and this is Katie, the Innovations Waiver Participant Beneficiary. So a couple of things. First of all, I'm sort of anxious to hear the report from the Consumer and Family Advisory Committee to see if my comments at last month's board meeting about how LME MCOs seem to respect the law that says you can't force individuals to take medication, yet somehow the LME MCOs don't want to enforce the law that gives Katie the right to choose who touches her naked body. So I'll be interested to hear if that comment from last month made it to the Consumer and Family Advisory Committees, and if they have any information to bring back to you about that. But anyway, so at the Quality and Performance Committee, there was this, the grievance and complaint chart. And once again, when it's broken down into the rate per 1,000 individuals served, the IDD rate continues to be 3 times the rate of mental health and substance abuse. The number of complaints per 1,000 individuals served. So the IDD rate, it's 3 times higher, and it remains that way. So again, I'm asking why that continues to be, and why, anyway. All right, so I also discovered that this grievance thing is supposedly reviewed in detail through the the Human Rights Committee, which is a committee of this board of directors. So I know this isn't public Q&A, but I don't know when the Human Rights Committee reports to this board of directors on the grievances and complaint details. Okay, so then next, I got a copy of this, and on, I don't know, they're not page numbers, but one of the pages talks about ICFMR rate increases, and I think it's funny that in the outcome, it says we stabilized a critical component of care for individuals with IDD, ensuring an ongoing level of quality care in the community. An ICF IDD is not a community setting, it is an institutional setting. Even though you may have an ICF IDD that is not a state facility, it is still not a community setting. So I just thought that was a funny way to term that. And speaking of community settings, and with Medicaid reform, I'm just always sort of interested that as part of this whole Medicaid reform process, I don't hear anybody talking about the changes coming from CMS, either in the MCO regulations, and there's some real major changes coming to the MCO regulations, but there's also this process of home and community-based services and the regulations that are changing for HCBS settings. And this applies also to the elderly, the CAP VA waiver, the 1915C waiver. And the National Health Law Program puts out this fabulous newsletter, Health Advocate. And so I was reading through it, and one of the fun things they point out as part of the new regulations, and the states are having to do transition plans to CMS and blah, blah, blah. But one of the things I didn't realize was in the new regulations, and this is going to be a CMS regulation, I think in 2017, and so this organization is going to have to come to terms with this regulation, as is DSS, who administers the CAP DA waiver. States must, not shall or may, states must offer each HCBS, so each waiver participant, states must offer each HCBS participant an option of a non-disability specific setting. Wow, that sounds like a big change. So that means no more group day supports. You're going to have to offer a specific, a non-disability specific setting. So I wonder why I'm not hearing any discussion about any of that. And then also back to the Quality Improvement Committee meeting, there was a little item, and it's in your packet, and there's a statement that says, as follow-up to the backup staffing reports, the hours missed represent 0.93%. 0.93% of services were missed due to no backup staffing. Well, considering that innovations is a $50 million expenditure year to date, that 1% seems like a lot of money that's missed because of no backup staffing, and so I guess that's money that's just in your fund balance now. So that just seems like an attempt to minimize the impact of the hours missed. Anyway, thanks.
Thank you. Jerry Rice?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Good to see y'all again. You know, I've been thinking about this merger, or collective four of in the state, and the thing that comes to my mind, it's so vivid. I go back to my reporting that I did in 2001 with Carmel Hooker Odom and Lanier Cancer, and Medicaid lady, what's her name? Tara, she was there. Tara Lawson. I got this video, and it's real. You ought to see that. There's about 400 people over the Mayheck building. I guess Jen was there, wasn't she? Jen looked old enough to be in there at that time. And I think about what the presentation was about, and how they streamlined that thing, and how they put particular people, with 50 people in a room, they put them all in different places, 50 in a room, and they had people leading them in there, in that 50. They had a person designated. Well, the one that got our group, they didn't get what they wanted, because we're the only group that went against the secretary and the other folks. Well, I'm saying that for a purpose. Everybody's got a ring in their nose if they're hooked to the state in some way. They got a ring in their nose, and they can't do much more than just follow the one that's in the front. So when I think about the presentation that was given on that day, and the plan that was drawn up, we're not deviating very little from that plan that day. So if you think you're getting something by this merger, you better rethink it. Because we're headed down that road that they put into play in 2001. And the only thing they're doing is just kind of, you know, we'd raised on the farm. And we herded cattle and the sheep and places. And that's all I can see right now is that image of how they're gathering them up and getting them in and corralling them. And that's all this MCO is all about right here. You've done hard work, you've done interesting work, and I congratulate you on all the good things you've tried to do. But I'm going to say it's really all of naught. Because what's in the end is going to be big insurance companies. They're going to take us over. Because there's no way that they're looking at human life. The pretty words in the book and the letter that they're writing about taking care of the people, that's all just a myth. And you remember these words on down the road. Because ever since 2001, we've heard this, they're taking care of it, they're taking care of it. Let me tell you, if you live in the real world where I do, and deal with kids, deal with families, and deal with them on a daily basis, deal with them 24/7 with your phone in your ear, let me tell you, it's getting worse and worse and worse. But what I keep hearing is, it's getting better, it's getting better. And they did that to y'all, and I say to y'all, I'm talking about us, I'm talking about the board, I'm talking about our community. They keep telling us about all this, and we put our fund balance into a big pot. Then all of a sudden, here they come after it. Then here we go fighting to get it back and put it out here to try to help people, and what's happening? Now they're going to close in on us now and merge us. What's going to happen there? They're going to suck more money out. So I don't think I'm singing to the choir, or I am singing to the choir. But the real message here is the people are dying out here. Literally, dying on the vine. And since 2001, what the state has really hoped for, they're getting. People are dying by attrition. They're not getting the services. Buncombe County heard a great message from the LME here about services and the money they needed to do things. Buncombe County's going to come up and do something else. It disappoints me that we can't all get on the same page. The county is sucking out a lot of money. But anyway, we appreciate what you do for people as much as you can do. But in the end, I'm hearing the same message. Hospitals are full, kids can't get services, the schools are over the hill and they can't get services. So they're a disaster coming, and it's going to come pretty quick. I don't like the gloom and doom, but that's what it is. Thank y'all.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda, we have the approval of agenda and the prior minutes, and we have two sets of minutes. The minutes from the February 25th meeting and the minutes from the March 17th minutes. You do that in one motion.
I move we accept the minutes from those meetings
And the agenda.
and the agenda if there are no changes.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you. Okay. Conflict of interest disclosure, General Counsel and CCO Tracy Hayes.
No new conflicts have been reported. If anybody has any new conflicts to report, please let me know.
Okay, thank you. Consumer and Family Advisory Committee report, Pat McGinnis, CFAC Chair.
Thank you. I'd like to say a few things, and then possibly we might need to hear from Nancy. I believe there have been announcements since that 3 of the meetings we met locally. Western met the 8th, Central met the 14th, the Northern met the 15th, and then the Western Highlands met the 21st of this month. We heard a presentation by Smoky Provider Network on Smoky's Community and Capital Reinvestment Plan in the Lenore meeting. We also heard information about the C3 356 as well as other reinvestment initiatives. We also had further discussion on the statewide collaborative CFAC meeting, and including a review of the registration materials and details of today's agenda. But we've had some positive feedback from across the state about the statewide collaborative CFAC meeting. Registration is now open, and CFAC members throughout North Carolina have begun to register. It will be at the Sheraton in downtown Asheville on April the 22nd. Our CFAC steering committee will meet to finalize any loose ends on the, I believe it's the 11th of April. I'm glad, and I've had some calls this week from CFAC members, so I'm going to go on and talk about a little bit of that too. So we're glad that Judy and Nancy were able to attend the emergency board meeting. As CFAC, we're concerned not only about the future of services, but Smokey and the future of CFAC. As our guest speakers that we had at our CFAC meeting in Lenore, we had initially had somebody from DSS, possibly in Alexander County, that canceled on us. So Susan Jenkins, a member from Alexander, suggested that we have her providers come and talk. So we had Risk Care come. And this may, in a way, talk about some of the issues that Mary brought up. We talked about services and we talked about choice. And, you know, we were allowed to ask questions and even about working as our family members provider. And also possibly about having other family members do backup staffing. And I know this, you know, not only because other people were asking questions and talking, but, you know, I was even asking questions and asking them if they served the VA healthcare facility. Because I have somebody that gets services through the VA, and I was wondering what services do they have that we don't have, type thing. And I was actually on the elevator last week with a woman from the peer support program in Durham, in the Durham hospital, and they had moved her to the top floor with the executive director on the same floor. And I asked her about peer support there, and she said, we do peer support in every area. So, you know, that's good. Going forward, you know, as we move into integrated healthcare and stuff, maybe peer support can grow in that direction. But we were allowed, as CFAC members, to ask a variety of questions to these providers about how they cared for our loved ones and make our suggestions and stuff too. And I thought it was a really good meeting. I probably don't remember word for word what all was said, but it would have addressed some of the things that I think Mary was having concerns about. Another thing, you know, we talked about in Lenore was a lot of our members not only attend Smokey CFAC, but a variety of committees, not only with Smokey, but other places. And we discussed the various openings and possible openings at a variety of other committees, at state level committees, and how and whether we thought this could help our CFAC. We also discussed the state CFAC because they have a variety of openings coming available sometime soon. And then we discussed the upcoming public hearings on Medicaid reform that are happening in our region, and several of us plan to go to those. And then several others of us are planning to go to trainings and conferences. And lastly, we've had an extremely large number of our CFAC, it seems like, been in the hospital in the last month. Not necessarily for mental health, but we've had illness and sickness to some of our members in the central region. And so I'm going to see if Judy or Nancy wants to say anything else, because I heard that one of the meetings was a little interesting this last week.
Okay. Must have been us. But we had a really good CFAC meeting. We had Family Press came and did a complete presentation on their services in Rutherford and Polk County because of the number of complaints that had gone out against this provider. And several of the CFAC members actually used Family Press and had brought a lot of concerns to Smokey. They have addressed them with Family Press. They have met with them on several occasions, and their presentation was really good. And they even got a couple of comments from a couple of CFAC members that they were beginning to be very impressed with them stepping up to the plate and doing what needed to be done. And Then we had a really good meeting with Donald Root, so we felt like we learned a lot and gave a lot of feedback at our CFAC, and ran about an hour over, and nobody wasn't going to leave. They wanted to hear these two presentations and be able to address their concerns with the provider.
Were there new concerns mentioned?
No, they're working on the concerns that were met and were happening in Rutherford County. They had a walk-in clinic, and several of the consumers were walking in, nobody wasn't there. Smokey was right on it, went down there, met with them. Now you can walk in the hours that they're there, they've got staffing, they're meeting the needs and concerns for Rutherford County, and that was our biggest concern.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is Provider Advisory Council report. Duncan Sumter's not here, but he wanted me to read this brief report. The Smoky Mountain Center Network Council met on March 16th, 2016. We addressed items related to our bylaws, my committee software, and our subcommittees. There were reports on the clinical integrated care, alpha, and IDD subcommittees. Population management items were reviewed in the clinical and integrated care subcommittees. The IDD subcommittee report brought forward a great deal of discussion related to the 1115 waiver. Smoky Mountain Center presented their community and capital reinvestment initiatives. And our next meeting is April 20th, 2016 at 10 o'clock at 356 Biltmore Avenue. Next item on the agenda is Performance and Quality Committee report. Bill Kennedy.
Good evening. We just reviewed the monthly performance improvement grid and our quarterly reports on our grievance complaints. And there was a provider satisfaction survey. All of these are in your packet. We didn't like the way the provider satisfaction survey turned out. It had rated us fairly low. Some of it was the statistical way. They figured in the no response as a negative, and if you take that out, it looks more positive. On the DHS reports, there's some new criteria that we were not there before, so we're out of compliance in several areas, but there's plans and work on bringing all those into compliance. Generally, our trends are pretty good. We have a higher hospital readmission rate, so we're looking at that to see what's going on there. We do have a really high penetration rate in Medicaid and uninsured, the highest or close to the highest of all the LME MCOs. So we're doing a really good job of reaching out. And some of those higher numbers of clients we're serving could be making some of those other numbers show up, because we're reaching into, doing a good job of reaching the people that need help. The grievance resolution is all taking place within 30 days, except for one in the last quarter, so we're looking good on our grievance, internal grievance stuff. And that was the main stuff we did. We looked at our trends, and you can look at that too, but basically, we're still doing pretty good. Like I said, that provider survey is a little bit of an odd one. And then the categories that you look, and the questions in the provider survey, we're looking at how they relate to our standards and categories we put these issues in. So we'll revisit that, and then it's a shame Duncan wasn't there, because I would have loved to hear from him with the provider, but we'll expect to get his report on that next month, and then so it'll really be April before we have much on that too. But we had a good meeting, and if any other members had anything to add that I might have left out, we're having a good meeting. So.
Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is the County Commissioner Advisory Board report. Vicki Green is not with us tonight, so we'll receive that report at our next meeting. Our next item is the Bylaws Committee report. We'll call on Tracy Hayes and Jay Carroll.
We handed out the revised bylaws at the last board meeting, and we'll ask for 30 days to review those. So Unless there's any discussion, questions about the changes that were proposed, I think we would request that you put them to a vote.
The only thing I had, that was going from 2 terms to 3 terms, I thought it was taking the term limit off, but it was just adding that term to the chair. In that bylaw change, as I recall.
That was
Show off.
The chair, let's not pass it on.
Jim, you have anything?
No, I don't have anything to add.
Any questions? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve?
I move we approve the revised bylaws.
Okay, is there a second?
second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, passes unanimously. All right, thank you. Next item on the agenda, a couple of things I want to mention. First, our December board meeting is scheduled for December the 8th, but due to the meeting in Pinehurst, which is during that same time period, we need to change that meeting date to possibly the December the 1st. And by changing that, we'll need a motion to change that meeting date. So moved.
My second.
All right, we have a motion and a second.
I'm sorry, who's second?
Pat begins.
And all in favor of changing the December board meeting from the 8th to December the 1st, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Nominating committee update, recommendation is to, for Michael Lavender to serve as vice chair. Is there any discussion?
No.
Seeing none, is there a motion to, place him as vice chair?
I move we.
Okay,
Second.
all right, motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations, Michael. Condolences.
Good job. Thank you for accepting.
Committee assignments, a couple of things. Dr. Khan is going to serve on the Performance and Quality Committee. Judy Poe is going to be on the executive, recommend her, she served on the executive committee. And we're going to ask, Ira doesn't know this, if he would serve on the finance committee. Michael Lavender will actually move from performance and quality to finance. So all these folks are willing to serve. Is there a motion to,
What time do they meet on Thursdays?
at 3 o'clock? Is that
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
When I could probably not make it at 1:30 on Thursday.
Before I ask you one question, so moved, Mr. Chairman.
okay? Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous, thank you. And just a couple other items to mention, the NC Tides. Today is a drop dead date to let Jill know if you want to go. If you'll see her after the meeting, those dates are April 24th through the 27th in Raleigh. The spring policy forum is June 20th through the 21st at the North Raleigh Hilton. Registration is not open yet. Jill will send us some information about that meeting. And also, the heads up, the Pinehurst meeting is December 7th through the 9th. And as always, Jill will send us information about the registration for that meeting.
When did you say NC Tyler?
NC Ties is April 24th through the 27th.
And it's in Wilmington, isn't it?
Yes.
But
Yeah.
today is the
Yeah, but
last
it's in,
day.
I thought it was in Wilmington, yeah.
Pinehurst is December.
7th through the 9th. Okay. Next item on the agenda is report of our Chief Executive Officer, Brian.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick housekeeping items here, and just to help make reference to some of the things in your packet. There is the heroin, so let me start off with the naloxone initiative. Is anybody from the board part of that? We had such a big room full of folks, I wasn't even sure if board members were there or not. Man, it was great. Just all the way around, the level of discussion in the room, the questions I was asked, the interviews, the follow-up, both in the media, Facebook, was really just tremendous. And it's great when you can do something that is so easily recognized as helpful to the community, I'll just put it that way. I think we really hit a home run with that, and very, very pleased. The Heroin Summit, and again, that's just one of several of our initiatives. And I know Steve would be poking me if he was sitting next to me saying, I remember we're going to be introducing these at a regular interval so that we're able to, get a nice discrete message out about each one, and it doesn't all just kind of bleed together. And if you didn't get a bound copy of our reinvestment plan, we have a couple of them left. So I'm really very excited about that. The Heroin Summit, we kind of just fell into this after reading an article in the newspaper about, and Tracy, you'll have to remind me of the position of this woman, the U.S. Attorney.
She is the U.S. Attorney for the Western District of North Carolina.
There was a really nice article in the paper talking about, her particular concerns about the resurgence of heroin and opioid use, and Tracy gave her a call, and lo and behold, we were able to kind of hop on an initiative that she's calling the Heroin Summit. It's a conference on March 30th, and apparently the registration to that is closed, but we'll be well represented there by Dr. Martin, who's going to be part of a panel discussion. It's primarily geared toward the law enforcement and co-sponsored by the Montgomery County Sheriff's Department and the Asheville Police Department. It was really great to see on, I guess it was Tuesday when we had our press conference, the sheriff here who had some great comments to make. Caldwell C3 groundbreaking, and the invitations for that event are in your packet, Tuesday, April 12th at 3 p.m. So we'll have the gold spray painted shovels, Ronnie. I understood you were donating those shovels from your company. It'll say Ronnie Beal on the
Good.
shaft of them, as I understand. So that'll be a nice little.
I get the shaft enough.
That was great when I heard the idea.
One more shaft wouldn't hurt.
Big bold letters. And that's one you all know we've been working on for a long time, so we're very happy about that. And then the C3 at 356 ribbon cutting, and there's another little flyer in your packet about that. That'll be just a great event. And Carolina Health Tech Live. Steve, why don't you give yourself and us a plug on that, would you?
Carolina Health Tech Live is an event that Smokey is one of the primary sponsors, and what we're doing is, what the whole Carolina Health Tech Live theme is identifying and showing the community and also North Carolina and some of the neighboring states that we are looking at and participating in one of the most innovative, I would say it's called an expo, not necessarily a conference, that's in the state, in this local area. And what we have done is invited as many as we can reach right now. We're getting confirmations as we speak, actually, of the behavioral health as well as integrated health technology that will, that's in advance of what's right before us. So we're taking one leap, maybe several months or years, a leap ahead to try to prepare people for what's coming, not necessarily what's coming right now, but what you have to prepare for the future. So I was reviewing the game plan just this morning again, and it is held at the Renaissance. If that's right, at the Renaissance. It's held at the Renaissance.
Or Crown Plaza.
Oh, Crown Plaza, I'm sorry. The Crown Plaza. And we have the expo as well as the other facility as well, where we have speakers, and you can see in your packet there's guest speakers there. And we just landed another one that's going to be very interesting to have him do it. I'll let you read about that, won't go into the details. But he'll also attract a large crowd. So we're, like I said, a big sponsor of it, and we're reaching out to the neighboring states, Tennessee, South Carolina, Georgia, Virginia, also. With the guest speakers that we have, we expect to attract about maybe somewhere between 700 and 1,000 people. So it's I hope you guys help us advertise it a little bit too, because I have my team under some numbers that they have to generate enough numbers to make sure that it's a success.
Showcasing cutting-edge innovations in technology-enabled care.
And the part of it, I'll go a little bit further, just the part of this that's different is that we're inviting specific participants and exhibitors. It's only those who are technology related. And we're also inviting venture capitalists and equity people as well, because they'll attract more of the vendors, because the vendors want financing for their new project. And then we're also doing the local invitation to providers so they can see what's to come and what they have to prepare for in the future. And so I think all around, the whole methodology behind it is pretty good, because everyone's going to get something out of it.
That's true, because the lady who was going to come and speak on the IDD and what she's running up in Virginia is unbelievable. I mean, it blew my mind when Jesse went up and came back and kind of gave me a word of prayer on stepping outside the box and thinking about my son. And I can't wait to meet her and hear more of what she said. Maybe, because then I'll have to think more outside the box. So.
And we purposely selected speakers who were somewhat leading edge, and I'll even mention controversial to some degree, because they're challenging people to think differently.
Yes.
And that's usually what innovation is all about, is thinking differently.
Well, you CFAC folks, you know, it's a fantastic opportunity for consumers and families to experience. You know, just as Steve said, be able to experience the different technologies, see it, touch it, do it. So,
And Jerry's going to be there, so
awesome.
he's getting excited.
Awesome. I'm excited.
But it's scary for Mama. But he's
And actually, what I neglected to mention too, I'm taking the opportunity to promote this, because the success depends a lot on what we do, is the main event, the area, we have 2 stages back to back. And what we do, the difference is this: people can actually, we want individuals to walk up on the stage and actually touch and feel. So usually you're sitting in a conference in a chair, you get your pamphlet and you walk away. Well, this environment is going to be one where you can walk on the stage and actually touch and feel what the actual invention is, regardless if it's integrative or behavioral health. So it's a little bit different than most.
Okay. Secretary's consolidation proposal. We're able to have a conference call to at least, for folks on very short notice, to hear what I had heard based on the meeting that myself and the other CEOs had with the secretary last Thursday afternoon. It involved a group discussion initially, and then we met with each of us and our partners, shall we say, where we had more private, I guess, discussions. And I don't really, as much discussion and flurry as there is about this, and we put together some information for staff and a press release, and I've seen different quotes in the media. There really isn't a lot more to say at this point, other than my own ongoing communication with the CEO at Partners, who's Rhett Melton, and I spoke with him. And he was at the same meeting I was. It wasn't really conducted in a way where we had any time afterwards to talk or debrief. A group of us met outside the building for about 5 minutes, and then everybody had to take off. In fact, Partners had a board meeting that evening, so they were able to have whatever level of discussion, they could at that point. And then Rhett and I spoke yesterday morning. And, you're going to hear an awful lot about this. And I would say there's two forks in the road here on this, to use a broad brush. One being, there will be those that resist this at, I'll say, all costs. And what does that mean? One of the questions that I pose, not because I'm considering it, but just because it would be the question on everyone's mind, by what authority, is the secretary requiring this, asking this, demanding this, whatever word you might choose to use. And, that led to a discussion about DHHS's ability to terminate contracts, award them to other cooperative LME MCOs, potential for legislation that would require this. And there will be those that may want to test that. And I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, but again, just trying to paint a complete picture for you. And people recognize that there's an election in the fall, when there could be a new governor, there could be a new secretary, regardless of the outcome of the election or not, and things change. And, at this point, what's happened is a group of CEOs went and had a meeting and, learned about an expectation, I guess it's fair to say. And there will be those that say, well, one way or another, this is probably going to happen. We can fight it, we can litigate on it, we can ignore it, and we're going to spend a lot of time and energy negatively. And maybe that time and energy would be better spent on properly positioning ourselves for the future. Because one of the greatest risks associated with this that I bring up at every opportunity is that folks become so distracted by this activity that they forget about the primary goal or target, which is our ability to adapt ourselves in preparation for a larger Medicaid reform effort. So you could see how this could be something that becomes so overwhelming for folks in lots of different ways that they lose sight of that more important goal. And it all really, instead of being advantageous, works against folks. So that has been the tenor of the conversations that I've had with Brett, and he is of that same perspective. And I don't want to, overstate the content of our conversations, or these are private, talks that we're having, as you would expect if you were in my shoes or his shoes. But he's been very open and very congenial in his approach, and the good thing is we are on the same page in terms of looking at this as a solution that could be in the best interest of our organizations and therefore Western North Carolina. And if we can stay on that road, we will make the best of it. We're all in the food chain, and our challenge is to do the best that we can with the particular legislation or policy or directive. And our goal, of course, now is to stay in the game, and again, continue to position ourselves positively for the future. Now, a nice segue into the Medicaid reform aspect of this is around, again, a current theme that I have around these discussions with the Secretary and legislators is that if you're going to do this, you're going to put people through this, please make it for a very good reason. And that reason would be an explicit role for the LME MCOs in the future of Medicaid reform. I mean, that's just logical, right? And you wouldn't do this politically or for any other reason if there wasn't a real good feature associated with where the state's going. And that's that's a bargain that isn't completely made yet, I would say. I would, hope that all of you in your various positions, and especially folks that end up in Raleigh, can really take that message forward, because we don't want to be going through all of this and subjecting ourselves again, even in the best of scenarios. And I would say, the work we did with Western, and it's nice to see Charlie here. Charlie, even in the best of cases, this is a tremendous undertaking. It's not inexpensive in time or money, and when we're doing those things, we aren't doing other things. So please make it worthwhile. And whether or not that sentiment is reflected in the state's, what I would say is the state's strategic plan, which will be articulated in the waiver application, remains to be seen. But wouldn't that be a nice sentiment for what we are doing? So I'll just leave it at that. And I know Ronnie spent some time this week in Raleigh and may have some additional comments, or some of you may have some questions that I may or may not be able to answer. So
Covered it pretty well. We met with the governor yesterday between bathroom legislation, and we had some talks about this and other things. And what Brian said is correct. The map that you saw with the consolidation, it's just it's coming down the pipe. I don't think I iterated to the governor, and the other ones are, is that what scares us all to death is privatization. When that word comes, we will no longer be meeting in this circle. I can assure you of that. There's no reason to. You no longer have the input. The money will then go to stakeholders. So if you want to complain, you go through those states, they have a 21-step process for you to send a complaint. So however you think you got it bad now, Billy's committee ain't seen nothing. So, it's, if we're going through this, that's the big thing. And now that's where these lines are not here. These numbers, when you see the 296, 568, that's just not pulled out of the air. And you have insurance companies who are literally beating the doors down. That's why they have more lobbyists in North Carolina than any other state. Because there's a lot of money at stake here. And so that's what we had that discussion yesterday. And so what I think what Smokey and what all of us need to concentrate on is we could, in some counties are really fighting this thing. They really are. We can go down that path, but you're beating that dead horse. I don't know how long you can beat it, but it's a dead horse. I really believe that. So I think we need to keep positioning ourselves by number one, providing the best service at all possible to the people. Because at the end of the day, if you've got these counties behind you, that's what's going to matter. And I think I think we're trying to do that. And we reiterated said that yesterday. But so we had good discussions, and but it's a big undertaking. It's a lot of people. But you compare that to what you're looking at Tree and what they're about to undertake. But there's no reason we should be able to have the same access to services in any zip code you live in North Carolina. And if you live in the Ranger District in Cherokee County, or you live at the end of Dyer County in North Carolina. So that's the whole idea. And I think the Secretary is, and he, if you not noticed, when they set deadlines, they pretty much meet it. And we've been very involved. Brian's been really involved, and it's good for Smokey. And so we're really concerned about all the rural counties. That's what concerns us, is the rural communities. As it stands now, if you don't know this is what's really bothersome. There's 20 counties in North Carolina that will now have about 14% more legislators than the other 80 combined, when all the new district lines are drawn. If you didn't understand that, be sure you do that, understand that. That's where the votes are. That's where the money goes. So rural counties, even more so than ever, you better keep your nose in the trough. And a lot of rural counties in this 31 county catchment area here. Lots of us. So it was good meeting. Smokey has probably, if not the best reputation throughout this state. With all the problems that we may have or perceive we may have, just visit. All you gotta do is visit. I've been to all of them. Just visit. That's all you gotta do. So I think we're going about it the right way. I'm very proud of this organization and the steps that we're taking. But during election year, things might move a little slower than anticipated, but if the election goes the way it should, you'll see it move right along. I really believe that. But backing up, just one thing, if you're not hearing about the synthetic heroin in North Carolina, we didn't talk about this yesterday, you'll see a big news release today probably. If you've not heard about this, there's 19 deaths attributed so far to synthetic heroin. This stuff is called Dr. I don't know how to spell it, but I tried to give it a whirl. Fentanyl. It's 80 times more potent than heroin. I think that was 19 deaths, 4 or 5 in West North Carolina. It is synthetic heroin. It looks like heroin, smells like heroin. You'll see a big press release today on it. It is the 19 deaths have happened since since January 18th. So that's something else to be concerned with, Brian. This is something new. So, it's something else it's something else out there. And the Narcan does not touch it.
That's what I was asking, Narcan's
No.
not touching it.
Does not touch it. It's almost immediate. It's just, so you'll hear about that. That was one of the discussions, and you'll hear more about, I think you see a press release today on it. I don't know that, but that was the title. But it's a really bad. If you don't know, and this was talked about a little bit yesterday, the price of the pills are going this way. So the opiate users are looking for other avenues, so that's where the heroin come back. It's coming. West North Carolina does lead, as Brian's committee will tell you, they're leading the state in deaths. West North Carolina is, in heroin overdoses. But where's this stuff coming from? Now you've got this new stuff coming in, and what they, and you're looking for substitutes. So this stuff is new. There've been 50 deaths in the South, 19 of those in North Carolina. So, and some of those in West North Carolina. So somebody can pronounce that a little bit better. I don't know.
Is that the stuff that they use in surgery? When they put you under, when they put you to sleep, is that the same stuff?
HIT is a derivative.
Fentanyl would be the.
Right. That's what I was thinking. Is that what you said?
I don't think that's.
ACETYL. I think that's how you spell it. Look at that, Tracy.
It is. I've got a great nephew that's on it, just fell from a
Oh, it's a
24-story
fentanyl, okay.
building off of a
Small.
patio, 10th floor, caught him, 24 years old. So I know what a family's going through. I know what my nephew's going through right now. And I see my great nephew in a coma, don't know whether he's going to live or die. And it's horrible.
What happened? Did he take this stuff?
And went into a seizure. It's on 21st floor, fell off, 10th floor, caught him, balcony.
He was taking it.
Acetylfentanyl.
So it's a Schedule 1 drug.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's scary.
Did you look at that, Myron? Okay, good.
And they do give it for pain in hospitals.
Mhm.
They give it for chronic pain. They're fentanyl patches. You know more about this than I do.
But that's not acetylfentanyl.
No.
That would be the fentanyl that we've had for 30 years.
Right.
This stuff is real cheap. It's,
I believe that's part of what Jackson's position down
His
there
was-
before.
I
think that was
for sleep.
Propofol, that's right. Propofol,
Another
sorry.
anesthetic.
Anyway, he wants sidetrack, go ahead.
I've got one question. You said that you brought up to the governor about being scared of privatization. What was his response to that?
He said, well, he said that's on down the road. He said, right now we're concentrating on getting our LME MCOs to provide the best service we can for the citizens. That's what the secretary's concentrating on. Standard pack answer.
That's a good way to end.
Now, the one thing we might want to add here is around governance and board structure. And of course, remember when we had this episode before, we had two things that happened at once. We had the consolidation or the recreation, I guess we could say, of a board of directors that came at the same time that legislation was enacted that changed the requirements around membership. Now, in that same legislation, which is the law now, there is a caveat where if you reach a certain population threshold, you have the ability to request a different governance structure. Well, because all of these organizations will be large enough to meet that standard, it's very, very likely that even in a short session, you'll see something that will change the requirements around board governance, that'll structure it in, I'll just say, some way. And, obviously, to me anyway, obviously, there has to be a regionalization approach to this. It's, 31 counties. You just look at the map, you can't make that be any different than what it is. It's a very large area geographically, a large number of counties, a large number of stakeholders. You can't have a functional board of greater than, let's just say, X. So how you do that is you have to create some kind of structures underneath a governing board. And how that would be done exactly, I'm not going to try to say I know, or perhaps even any of you know at this point, but I think it would have to look something like that. Trillium has something like that now, as does Cardinal. So.
Well, it is a worry about that many more counties with less board representation, and how are we going to stay in touch with this organization, with those counties as spread out as they are, and how are we going to serve the clientele that we're supposed to be serving. So I've griped about board recomposition before, and I'll raise the issue again. We need to keep as many stakeholders as we can that'll participate and be good board people, but we need that input too. So
I wouldn't expect to see that change around board membership, but there could be ways that we could organize our catchment area that would provide greater, I guess, focus for counties, again, by going to more of a regional approach and having responsibility for specific regions within this larger catchment area. And that's the best solution. We've talked a little bit about internally, and I've shared that with Brett. And what else do you do? Otherwise it's just too big.
yeah, well, I understand. Thank you.
Okay. At this time, we need to go into closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318-11A1 in order to prevent disclosure of competitive health care information that is privileged or confidential pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 122C, 126.1, or not considered a public record within the meaning of Chapter 136 of the General Statutes, and to consult with attorneys pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318-11A3. Is there a motion?
So moved, sir.
Is there a second? Okay, motion and a second. All in favor of going into closed session, say aye. Aye. Okay. All right, our next item on the agenda is the Finance Committee report.
Yeah, closed session?
Yes, we're out.
Yes, sir. Fred?
I'm presenting financial statements as of the end of January 31st, so 7 months of the fiscal year. Cash and cash checking interest account came to 83.4 million. Cash in the Medicaid risk reserve now stands at 22.2. The investment in North Carolina trust stands at 14.3. The total assets for the period stood at $137.4 million. On the liability side of the balance sheet, accounts payable stood at $8.8 million, and the IBNR for accounts payable on the Medicaid side stood at $19.7 million. I won't go through the details of the fund balances per se, except to go to unassigned current year Medicaid, which stood at $7.1 million. This would be revenues over expense under the Medicaid program since the beginning of the fiscal year as of July 1st. So total liabilities and fund balance stood at $137.4 million for the period. Are there any questions in reference to the fund balance? Going to the next sheet, which is titled The Analysis of Revenues and Expenditures. I am reading from the fifth column under the Medicaid grouping. Medicaid service revenues stood at $158.5 million, expenses at $152.7. So revenue over expense for the period stood, as far as service dollars is concerned, at $5.8 million. On the administrative revenue stood at $20.4 million, expenses at $19.1. So revenue over expense stood at $1.3 million. So total combined stood under the Medicaid program at $7.1 million. The risk fund reserve contribution for the fiscal year starting July 1 to the present was an addition of $3.5 million. Going to the next grouping, the third column, state and federal. On the service revenue side, it stood at $34 million. On the expense side, yes, the expenses are greater than revenue on that side. It stood at $39 million. Expense over revenue for the period at $5.0 million. Administrative revenue side stood at $1.56 million. Expenses were greater than revenue at $3.73. So expenses exceeded revenue at $2.17 million. So the combined total under that column was a expense over revenue at $7.12 million. Now, let me explain that a bit. Again, we had a single stream reduction that was applied by the General Assembly, signed by the Governor. That contribution for single stream replacement that Smokey, the LME MCO was required to replace stood at $14.9 million. That is not a revenue. We're taking that from equity balance in order to cover those specific expenses, but it is not classified as a revenue. So those expenses are being paid. They're being paid out of our checkbook, so to speak. The equity that has been accumulated over time. So although there's a negative balance in this is predicted and predictable, and it's a direct result of the single stream replacement dollars that we are required to replace.
So that's going to continue to run
That
the
is
deficit.
going to continue to the balance of this fiscal year, and if the current legislation stays in place unmodified, it will continue into the next. The single stream requirement replacement for the next fiscal period stands at $20.8 million.
So that's going to be an issue that we're going to be seeing again and again.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Going to the total column on the extreme right of that report or that sheet, total all services from all sources, service revenue stood at $196.9 million, expenses at $194.2 million, so revenue over expense at $2.8 million. Administrative revenue for the period from the first of the fiscal year to the end of January stood at $22.76 million, expenses at $22.8 million. So expenses exceeded revenue on the administrative side by $56,507. Again, that is covered with equity contribution. So the net operating revenue over expense for the period stood at 2.7 million. Questions on the sheet? The last official financial statement is actually the cash flow statement, and I'll just read through the summary. What a cash flow statement is comparing from the beginning of the financial period, the cash available, to the end of the financial period, the cash available. So at the beginning of January, the cash balances stood at 99.6 million, at the end at 97.6 million. Yes, that is a decline. That will continue to decline because we are taking or replacing single stream reductions with our equity, so that cash balance will continue to decline over the period. From the first of the year, meaning July 1, cash balances stood at 100.3.6 or 103.7 million. It now stands again at 97.6, and that will continue again until the end of the fiscal year. That's just kind of sort of the way it is.
How many employees does Smokey have today?
Employees?
Total?
Approximately 487 would be the full.
Approximately, you don't know how many we got?
Well, there are always vacancies that exist at the moment, so I can tell you what the current count is. I'm telling you the budget is now.
Yeah, there are 8 slots in, that we saw in quality improvement that are trying to be filled.
So we got 487 that we think that's on this, that were paid out of this. Pretty close.
The next statement I'll review is the Medicaid budget to actual. We loosely refer to this as the clinical services budget. I will just review the major lines here. Total Medicaid B, which is essentially all of our Medicaid services on the mental health side, stood at a positive balance of $459,000. Under Medicaid C, which is the innovation program, stood at $40,000. And the total as far as Medicaid B3 services, which again, there are intensive planning efforts in terms of actually providing the services covered under their program, which is quite difficult in my area, stood at $938,000 for the period. So a positive balance in terms of $1.4 million as far as the Medicaid services budget was concerned as of the end of January. Questions about that?
On the Medicaid C?
Medicaid C.
On the Medicaid C, that number, do you see it fluctuating, and is it holding pretty steady?
I think I will communicate two different things, and they do combine to make sense. We receive a capitation under Medicaid C, which means that individuals in the innovation program are eligible for a certain level of service. The actual services they receive are authorized pretty much by service category. So the expenses kind of fluctuate with what's authorized and what's actually used. It looks like that's pretty much on for the balance of the year, so that it looks stable. 7 months of the fiscal year have passed. If past patterns continue, this is how it will end towards the end of the fiscal year. But again, you don't control several things. You don't control the actual authorizations that are made for the balance of the year, or you don't, with 100% certainty, predict what utilization will be for the balance of the fiscal year.
Did Medicaid C gives the smoke a little flexibility, Brian? Don't you have a little more flexibility on Medicaid C than the others?
Well, it's more, I will say it's more consistent.
Right.
Because those tend to be longer-term services where there's less, it's less dynamic than on the D side.
It don't go like this all the time.
Now, you're talking about a much smaller population.
Yeah, but you have more flexibility when it comes to the per patient costs, is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's
There's really not, on neither side, what we like is predictability.
Yeah.
We're all about predictability, and that's really what we're in, is a predictability game, to try to always know ahead of time, where we're gonna be with things. So there isn't a lot of variability really in anything ideally. And the further we go into this, the more mature providers are and consumers and we are, the more kind of standard it becomes.
Consistency is what we be.
Right. Right. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, by me saying it, that's not a bad
No.
thing.
Thank you.
Well, I won't cover the dashboards in any great detail, except I'll cover just a few unless there are questions. My first reference will be on page 2. This is the Medicaid current ratio. Medicaid current ratio stands for current assets over current liabilities under the Medicaid program, so it's a ratio of 2.89. This is healthy. Overall, under all sources, it stands at 3.73. It was noted earlier that it is trending down. That will continue to be the case for the balance of the year, again, because of single-stream replacement. That's just an economic consequence of that particular mandate. Moving quickly to the end on the defensive interval, which is 8. This is the Medicaid defensive interval. What this essentially says is of the cash that we have on board right now for the Medicaid program, if we didn't get an initial dollar, how long would the cash last to meet our current obligations? So this stands for days. So it currently stands at 92.7 days, which is a healthy place to be. Again, over time that will tend to decline, but we'll see. That would conclude my presentation. If there are any questions.
I have a question, I mean, I probably have already spoke to this first page 1 with our medical expense ratio. Is that showing because we're taking that money out? So that's where it's skewing that graph?
Well,
Part of it?
it's part of it. Let me, before I answer the generalizations that will become uncomfortable. Which graph are you referring to? Is there a difference?
The second one on the first page.
Okay. This is state and federal funded services. So this is the bucket that single stream replacement we're required to do. So this represents the state dollars, and it doesn't necessarily represent what we contribute to cover the difference. So yes, you will see expenses exceed what we are budgeted for, meaning the state and federal dollars we actually receive, and that will continue for the balance of the year.
Okay, thanks. I move we accept the finance report as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, Colin, is that who's going to present that? Red? Ryan?
I will defer to my colleagues.
All right, well, I'll get it started.
The new Brian Ingram, by the way. Crispy Carl.
You got a handout here that's a summary sheet that shows, and it says Human Resources Compensation Initiative Phase 1. And it says Phase 1 for a real good reason. And this is kind of a repeat of what we detailed out. It's a work in progress. It's us continuing to adapt ourselves in all kind of the elements around human resources to the environment we're in, and we're a pretty unique entity. You've heard our conversation before about how well an organization like this fits with state personnel, not very well, but we do our best with it. When those positions were created, I don't think anybody could have imagined there would be organizations like us. We're the only authority that is in state personnel in North Carolina, so it's a real struggle. And we do our best with it, and at some point in time, it's like a lot of things, we just get so far off that we have to make corrections and adjustments when things just don't work. and it'll always be imperfect as long as we're in this system, and we'll always be in this process of trying to deal with it. So a good bit of this has to do with that, quite simply. The COLA is something, you know, over the years, we have done this, and it becomes something that when we are able to do it, we do it. And we can't predictably do that each year. It's a function of our budget, it's a function of our capitation, and, you know, our workforce is the key to our success. And you said some nice things about us earlier, Ronnie, I appreciate, and it's because of the workforce, right? I mean, it's just that simple. And treating people in the best manner that we can is what we need to do. And when we can do that, we do that. The merit payments, there was a particular criterion. If my computer hadn't crashed, I could read you I guess there were 4 features associated with how we did this, and we had a really interesting process for doing this. It was really trying to identify people who perform really well and deserve to be recognized for that monetarily to the extent, you know, within our system we can do that. So we can talk about that in a little more detail to set essentially people that, you know, we could come to agreement on deserve that kind of recognition because they go above and beyond. And we had kind of a double system of reality checking that, whereby the particular supervisor would make the recommendation, and then as an executive leadership team, we reviewed all of that in total so that there was a, you know, people asked earlier, gee, could somebody kind of load up all the people that work for them? Well, no, you couldn't, because you had to go and defend your choices with your peers as part of the executive leadership team. And, you know, we could have spent 2 more months working on this. I don't know if it would have been any better. At some point, you come to an agreement about it being, again, a work in process, and you make peace with it and go forward. And then, you know, the other category, just some issues, again, where folks are out of sync with their particular job description and where they are with their steps. And you try to address that just with a monetary piece of compensation. And Jim is in the process of kind of a much bigger effort to make more corrections around this. So it's just, it's an incremental process. So.
Did we have a COLA at all in 2016?
We did not.
2015?
2%.
2%,
In
which
fact,
is...
the finance committee had asked me to look up the last 5 years.
Oh,
Last year, 2015, they received nothing. 2014, they received 2%. 2013, they received 2%, and they didn't receive anything for the last 5 years before that.
Right. So, and inflation didn't stop during that time, as far as I can tell. I'm always hesitant to approve this, but on the other hand, we're looking at a situation that, how are we going to keep our good employees when the state's telling us in 3 years you're going to be gone? So I don't think we have any choice on this, but to try to keep in the meantime, people's lives are in jeopardy, and we've got to keep our best people in their jobs and make them understand that even with the uncertainty, this is the place they can best help people. And it's going to be a competitive market. A provider told me the other day, Brian, are you polishing up your resume? So I'm glad you're sticking with us. So we need you.
Yeah, and I always feel a little awkward, talking about it, but, at different times, people have been very straightforward about it. I mean, retention is an enormous challenge for us. It's very simple what happens. Managed care companies come and they hire the folks, and it's poof.
And you look at the cost to retrain somebody, the time lost, as much as I hesitate.
You're going to see where it hurts the providers. If it ain't hurt Smokey, the providers is getting killed, the clinicians. They hire these kids out of college who don't have time to train them no more. And as soon as they get trained up and they get their license, boom, I mean, you get out here and you go across, you talked about these providers, that's who's really getting hurt. I mean, I know Smokey gets hurt, but this is a different deal. The providers is who cannot keep people.
Well, I told the finance committee that at CFAC on Monday night, we got a presentation on where Smokey is expanding. And if you take the time to look through this and you read through it, and we spent an hour and something with Donna Rose telling us where Smokey was getting ready to spend this money, what they were getting ready to ask their employees to do. They more than deserve what they're getting ready to get here, because the more that's being put on everybody out there, the more that Smokey is expanding and what we're getting ready to do, we need to make sure we have the best of the best, and we need them right here. They don't need to be somewhere else.
Okay, but I did pull up, and I meant to say this, and again, I just found it, my computer came back to life. So the criteria associated with the merit, it goes as follows: employees' accomplishments exceed the normal standards, expectations for the job. 2, the employee has fulfilled all normal job duties in addition to performing added duties to accomplish a special project or achieve a certain goal. I mean, that's just become the standard. I mean, you have your job and then you have everything else you get to do. The employee's work has substantially positively impacted the organization, our provider network, or our consumers. And 4, the employee serves as a role model for others, displaying desirable characteristics expected of our employees, such as outstanding customer service, positive attitude, and team leadership. There's just a complete range of folks from executive level all the way down to, and that's why we put the, not to exceed $1,000 on there. And I guess the version, I'm not sure which version of it you have, but on the earlier version we indicated that there would be, 2.0% or 1,000, whichever is greater. So if you're a lower paid employee, you're guaranteed at least that $1,000. And that's how we've done it.
And the finance committee talked about this for some time and recommended it unanimously. Just want to let you know.
Is there a motion on the floor now? Or
Not yet, unless you want to make it.
I'd like to move that we go ahead with this incentive
Second.
compensation.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Now we can discuss.
Any more discussion?
We get in the private sector, I have 26 employees and I can't afford to give them a 50-cent raise. The private sector still suffers. I have 26 employees, I have to make a payroll tomorrow on Ronnie Bill, and I cannot give them a 50-cent raise. The private sector still suffers, who makes the wheels turn. How much longer can the private sector turn this big wheel that's making these raises, that's paying for all this? All this money you're talking about comes from one place, and that's the taxpayer. This is all taxpayer dollars that you're talking about. They just don't have a machine that prints it. It's taxpayer dollars. It's created by working people that provide jobs, that I have 26 people on payroll tomorrow that I have to meet. So how much longer can that steamroller keep going? That's my question. Fred, you got that answer? Hello? Fred, come on. Come on, Fred.
There are PhD.
You ever met a payroll?
Answer you'd like.
Fred, you ever met a payroll? You ever made a payroll, Fred?
There's a motion and a second. Is there any more discussion? Okay, see if you're none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, passes unanimously.
I
Thank
make a
you.
motion to help Ronnie build his payroll tomorrow.
Is there any?
That dies for lack of a second.
23,000 every Friday.
Is there any other
Any
business?
volunteers?
Is there any other business?
I move to adjourn.
All right, is there a second?
What you said
We have
you
a
were
motion
opposed
second. All
to.
in favor of adjournment, say
I have to
aye.
make it.
Okay, meeting
There's not another one in here today.
There's plenty of dinner. Please see me if you're going to MC Tides. Deadline's now.
You made a payroll, Jack.
Yeah.